Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. On the screen, you see someone who many of you may recognize her face. Many of you may only recognize her name, Leila Miller, who I consider a dear, dear friend and a fellow warrior for marriage. Leila Miller is the author of several books. She's written A Primal Loss, The Now Adult Children of Divorce Speak, which is life-saving. It is traumatizing in a good way and in a bad way, depending on what side of that you are on. And then Impossible Marriages Redeemed. They didn't end the story in the middle. You've written about, okay, I'm trying to remember the other titles of the books. So many books, right?
Well, the other one that some people might know is Made This Way with Trent Horn.
That's what I was trying to think of, which should be a textbook in every school.
Kind of how to teach your children, either little children or teens, about these really the 10 most contentious moral issues of the day. And they all kind of hit on human sexuality in some way or another. So we just give really detailed and very simple ways to talk to kids about that. And then my first book was Raising Chaste Catholic Men. So that was fun. Yeah. So,
and you are in the middle
I'm in
of
the, yeah.
past the deadline for your
I
newest
am.
book.
I would like to say thank you, Sophia Press, for being so patient with me. I blew past a deadline, but I'm working very diligently on a book called Unholy Inversions. And it's how we invert things very commonly today. And I don't think we recognize it. But so each chapter is going to be an inversion that we do. And it shows us that we have flipped from what came before. So Catholicism is this 20 centuries of truth, goodness, and beauty. It is strung together with the tradition that was handed down from the Christ to the apostles, all the way through, the deposit of faith. And anytime you see something go from what we've seen in 2 millennia to suddenly flipping to something else, it's got to be a red flag for us. But we're modernists. We don't recognize any of it because we're swimming in modernism. So I just kind of go through some things that hopefully will just wake up really faithful Catholics. I'm not even writing this book for dissidents or progressive Catholics. I'm writing it for people like us. I mean, just things that I didn't even recognize for a couple decades after my reversion. So anyway, the inversions are everywhere. And anytime you see an inversion, it's from the devil. And so that's what I'm working on right now.
And we're going to talk about one of those inversions today, but it is true. And, I love Holy Mother Church and will never stray from her. Even when I see things that I'm like, oh, did they really say that? But it does say in the end times, good would be seen as bad and bad would be seen as good. I mean, that's the greatest inversion that there will be. And how can we not be there? Because when good, as you said, good Holy Catholics, the devout ones are all of a sudden go, well, this is okay. It's okay. Anytime I mention someone, for instance, entering a second marriage, they're like, well, but their new boyfriend, girlfriend / legalized adultery partner, they're really nice. Or my daughter's really happy, or my son. And it's like,
yeah,
you're missing the point. It has nothing to do with that. So,
and those are some of the inversions, which are, I talk about the two umbrella inversions, the two big inversions, and all the other ones kind of fall under that. And that would be putting man before God and putting feelings before truth. Feelings before truth. And that's where we live right now. We live in a feelings-based culture. And, it's funny because not to get on too many tangents already, Christine.
Oh, no, girl, I can pull you back in, and you and I are great on these.
Good, because, I always say that, we live in this feelings-based culture. And I say that a lot in my work. And I get a lot of pushback like, don't emotions are good. We are human. And I'm always trying to say, look, I'm emotional. I love I feel deeply. I have great sorrow for people. I have great joy for people. I'm a human like everybody else. The problem is when you let emotions lead instead of truth, that's the inversion, right? So it's not that we don't love and feel our emotions. It's that they need to be ordered correctly. And everybody used to know this, but we're taught to think with our feelings. And so people think if I criticize that, kind of what the massive feelings
Pushback.
That we live in. I'm one little voice saying, I'm obscure. I'm an obscure voice saying, hey, could we make sure our feelings are subordinate to our
see.
intellect and our will, which is what it's supposed to be. And then all of a sudden that one voice is just too much for people. How dare you? How dare, it's like, okay, I'm literally just one voice trying to go back to what the saints always said and what the church always said. But I get a lot of pushback, which is fine. I mean, again, it's a feelings-based culture and people get emotional about that. So I just trying to gently remind people you'll be a lot happier if you order your emotions underneath your intellect and your will. And that's just what we have to do as
And it's
Christians.
good that you say.
Yeah.
It's good that you say it's like we're swimming in it, so you can't see the mud if you're swimming in mud.
Can't see it.
And you have to be outside of it to look at it and go, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that I was swimming in that.
Yes. It's the air we breathe. It's like feminism. It's like, I always think of the people in the days of Arianism. There was like 300 years of Arianism. And so the faithful Catholics probably didn't even, sometimes they were so disoriented. And, the Arians who thought they were good Christians didn't know any better because everybody, even my bishop was Arian in those days, so I just think that if that took 300 years to kind of get everybody out of it and re-look at the truth, I'm not trying to be hard on everybody here because this is what we live in, but it is necessary to take a step back and say, let me compare what we're doing now to what we did 100 years ago, 300 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, or at the time of Christ. And all of that is very different from what we're doing now with this feelings culture. So all I'm saying is something that C.S. Lewis said, which I liked. He said, like for every, I'm going to paraphrase, but for every modern or new book you read or podcast or online, whatever, make sure you read 2 or 3 old books and old, works from the saints or whatever, because you're going to see the contrast and you're going to suddenly maybe get pulled out of your stupor and say, oh, maybe I haven't been able to recognize what the problem is because I'm so steeped in all of modernity. So anyway.
I was just listening to a podcast from Father Chris Alar today, and he was talking about Saint Louis, the saint whom the city is named after. And he was such a holy king, and he fought against everybody's lives were to be ordered to the Christian church, the Catholic Church. And the whole culture was that way back then. It's like it must be in line because it was Christian values. And so he went out and fought against Muslims and Jews and people who fought against Christian values. So people look at him today and they're like, what a racist, what a bigot. It's like, no. You have to go back to what was the culture back then. That was understood, is that if you're going away from Christ, you're going away from values centered. So that is a really good perspective. I had never heard that before, but it's absolutely true. We should go and see, well, inform our intellects, inform them while we're forming ourselves.
Right.
Oh, Leila, you were telling me, because Leila Miller and I are fans of saving marriages, and we've taken, speaking of pushback, we have been received so much pushback in our adult lives for our stances, which is the church's stance on marriage. And it's really funny because it's awful when you get a pushback from people in the church who should know better. And so one of the chapters, Leila, you said in your upcoming book is actually an inversion of the reflexive annulment seeking. So I work with Protestants and Catholics, and the Protestants are always looking at the Catholics like, what do you mean an annulment? It's either first marriage or not. Catholics have this, okay, well, the church checks to see if this annulment is valid or not, or, excuse me, if our marriage was valid at the time we conferred it or not, which, okay, that's great. That's what Jesus said. Unless the marriage is invalid, you're married until death. So that system's been scandalized. But this idea of reflexive annulment seeking, I'd like you to talk about that.
Yeah, it kind of hit me. 'Cause I'm very specific in this chapter not to go into the actual machinations of the annulment tribunals. Like that's a whole other story of like how we got from mostly objective impediments being, and only 360 annulments a year to 70,000, so that's a whole other issue. It's like, how do we go from objective impediments and rare to lots and lots and lots of annulments, plus it's all based on a subjective psychological or consent issue, which is very nebulous, and you can find those grounds if you want to. And that's a whole other topic. So I thought I'm not going to do the chapter on that. I'm going to do the chapter on the inversion of our mindset when something goes wrong. And our collective Catholic mindset used to be, and again, I can back this up, we could talk about it. It used to be if you had a miserable marriage, your expectation for yourself and everybody else's expectation for you was to be faithful. Okay, you have a horrible husband, you have a terrible wife, you have a terrible situation, you're miserable, you're unhappy. Maybe in some cases, and Pope Leo the 13th back in the 1800s said, sometimes when marriage comes to such a pitch that they can't live together anymore, the church allows them to separate. And what he says next is what we completely ignore. But always, the church never, he uses the word never like 3 times, never does the church despair of providing remedies and reconciliation. She never despairs of reconciliation, never tires. So that's pretty absolutist. And that was the expectation was if you get married, you're married once until death, right? And then you don't quickly find a way to get out of the marriage so you can remarry. Like that was just unheard of. The expectation was to fidelity. You married this person just like Christ married his spouse, us, we're terrible, and he died for us. He never was unfaithful for 1 second. So the vows were meant, St. Ignatius said, you can't overstate the permanence of marriage. And the expectation was lived out, which is okay. I might be lonely. I might, have this guy I don't really want to be with. I might have this woman who's off cheating on me. But that's my cross. I'm going to be faithful to my vow to God and witnesses. This is what we do as Christians. This is what Christ did. And so that's gone. Like that is so gone. And the way we know it's gone, Christine, is that you and I know because we deal with standards all the time. The people who do that, the people who have the same mentality that 2,000 years of Christians, of Catholics had, up until probably the 1970s, maybe. So all of it. We know that's not the way that people think now, because when a person does decide to do what everybody else always did, they're mocked, they're condescended to, they're looked at like they're freaks with 6 heads. Like what? And I'm talking publicly. I'm talking by people in the church. I'm talking about
people in their families.
The families, everybody's like, what is wrong with you? You need to, you get your divorce, or you got divorced, or someone divorced you against your will. Go get your annulment. Like go to the tribunal. What are you doing? Your marriage probably isn't valid anyway. And so this is such an inversion of what came before, and we don't even recognize it. I didn't recognize it. I was that way for the first 2 decades after my conversion, at least, or my reversion was, I would tell people in miserable marriages, God, just go get your annulment. Like, why would you be, it's a church thing. The church will give you your annulment and then you can remarry in the church. It's great. And we don't realize what this has done to us psychologically, what it does to marriages, how it inverts, the understanding of holiness and carrying our cross and our vocation. But it's completely the opposite of what it was before, and we don't even realize it. So now if you don't go reflexively to get your annulment, there's something wrong with you. And that can't possibly be, because that's not how Christianity has been for 2 millennia. So, yeah.
How do you think we got there? You think it was just the 1960s Vatican II and the misinterpretations of a lot of the documents and the infiltration of Satan into the church, all of the above, anything, specifics? All
of the above. It's modernism, Pope Pius X. I'm sorry. Yeah. Pope Pius X, I think it was, that wrote his encyclical against modernism. And he said, modernism is the synthesis of all heresies. And what modernism does, one of the things it does, is it cuts you off from everything that came before. So everything that previous generations did is bad. And so, like, I just read this recently. There was a guy a couple of years ago who quit as a teacher because they have this ESL, I guess, which is emotional social learning that they put in the public schools. And it's very standard. And basically, it's almost like leading with emotions rather than knowledge. And one of the things in there that he pointed out, which he could not live with and teach the students, is that other generations, which of course is a kind of a euphemism for your parents and your grandparents, other generations can be obstacles to your growth, to you. So see, everything that comes before has to be cut off. And this is what communists do, right? They cut off everything that comes before, these color revolutions and all that. Cut off tradition, cut off everything that came before. And then what do? You appeal to emotion. So again, the two big umbrellas. Right now we're living in this modernism, which is you put your feelings and your experiences and your desires and your pleasures ahead of the cross, ahead of what is right, what is true, good, and beautiful, because that's really painful. And then also modernism squarely puts man at the center, and God is kicked to the periphery. So it's what man wants to do. Man has to be happy, man, and so when you have a miserable marriage, and we've been convinced that marriage is a romance, marriage is about feeling, it's feelings now. It's not about a protective, union for, for bearing and educating children for the next generation. It's not about the children at all. It's only about the parents and whether or not they feel good together. And if they don't, then everybody has a right to go have a happy sex life, a happy romance. And so they move on. And now, Catholics are not immune to modernism. We know there's an infiltration in our church. I will tell all your listeners, go to the Catechism. It's numbers 675, paragraphs 675 to 677. So it's 3 paragraphs. And that tells you all you need to know about where we are. I'm not saying it's called the church's ultimate trial. And I can't tell you if we're in the ultimate trial. It could be 1,000 years from now that Christ comes again. It could be 100 years. It could be tomorrow. But what we see is that there isn't this, everybody's getting to know the faith better, and the church is ascending and everything is going to be great. And then once the church ascends, Christ will come again. It's so beautiful. Those paragraphs say exactly the opposite. And of course, the Catechism is a synthesis of every saint, encyclical, teaching, scripture, all this, footnoted. And so what the church teaches is when the Antichrist comes, when all this stuff happens, it will shake the faith of many believers because there will be almost like a fake religion. It will look real, but it won't be. And so it comes at this apostasy, it says, comes at the cost of truth and the cost of many souls. And so finally, what happens in the end, this is our catechism, that there will be a final unleashing of evil, not an ascendancy of the church. There will be a final unleashing, and basically there's just going to be a little group of, as Jesus said, will I find any faith left on earth when I come again? And that's what's going to draw Jesus down from heaven to meet his bride. So all of this is like standard Catholic stuff. We know that we have to go through this kind of it says that, that's what triggered me to say this. It says in those 3 paragraphs that this fake religion will be man being put at the center, and that we will think that we have found the solution to our problems at the cost of apostasy to the truth. So what we've done is everything's man-centered, everything's feelings-based, which is kind of the same thing if you think about it. And what do we have when someone's miserable? You go to your priest, you go to your therapist, you go to your family, and they say, "Oh, God wouldn't want you to suffer. He clearly wasn't the one. Yeah, he wasn't the one. She wasn't the one. Your soulmate. Okay, there's no such thing as that. The person that you're married to is your spouse. That's your
soulmate. Because the day you got married, your souls got tied together.
Marriage certificate, right? Yeah. And so they say you need to be happy. And so that is the mantra. Interestingly, C.S. Lewis, speaking of him, again, not Catholic, but his last written work was called "We Have No Right to Happiness." And he actually, you can look it up, Google it. And it's a story, he starts it out with a story of a divorce. Like, this wife wasn't happy, Mrs. Jones wasn't happy with Mr. Jones. It's like, well, you don't have a right to happiness. You have the right to do the right thing. That's what we are to do. So anyway, yeah. So this reflexive annulment seeking is a pressure that is on every married couple if things go bad, and it is demonic because there should be no pressure to go and seek a way to get another marriage, unless you have. And again, I always say this: unless there is an objective impediment that you really think, oh yeah, gosh, I didn't know he had another family.
When
across
we
the
got married, right?
Yeah, I didn't know that he had a vasectomy the week before we got married, and he never told me. Okay, yes, go get your annulment. That was fraud. But this idea that 20 years in, you're like, I'm just so tired of this, of putting up with this person and blah blah blah. And yet we have pamphlets in every parish that tell you how to go and get your annulment. And that's where the pressure is. I'll say one more thing. I know I'm babbling on this now, but I will
You're
say,
my guest. You're supposed to be
yeah,
doing the babbling.
well, I will say one more thing. When I said that Pope Leo the 13th back in the 1800s said we never tire of working towards reconciliation. We never despair of any marriage. Um, and JP2 said, the same thing. There are marriages which break down but are valid. And that's in Familiaris Consortio. And he said we have to honor and use these people who are standing for their faith. They are witnesses to all of us. And also current canon law says you may separate if there is grave moral or physical danger. You may physically separate, but in all cases, you must reconcile when those
Impediments are
concerned
gone.
situations get resolved. So in other words, the entire church says you can live apart, but you're still married. You're married, sorry, and hopefully, we will resolve. We'll try to get this better. But then I looked at an annulment pamphlet recently, and I couldn't believe it. It's like one of these things is not like the others, because it says about civil divorce. Well, yeah, you need to go ahead and get your civil divorce first, because a civil divorce is an indication that there is no hope for reconciliation.
What
I'm
isn't?
like, I,
It's an
I just,
indication that your spouse had money, went to a lawyer, and you were
exactly.
forced into signing because it's not even anything that you have a fair shake at.
Thank
It's
you.
no fault.
And it's actually, yes, anyone can get a divorce at any time
Yeah,
unilaterally,
doesn't
even if
indicate
it's a
anything.
party. And it's guaranteed, and it has no indication as to whether or not the marriage is valid, none whatsoever. Nor does it have any indication whether or not there could be a reconciliation. So you have Leo the 13th, you have the canon law, you have the witness of even Saint Queen Catherine. She should be a saint. Queen Catherine of Aragon. Henry VIII. You have the entire history of the church. Saying we will work towards reconciliation when things go wrong. And Fulton Sheen said it. He's got a great video called Marriage Problems. I think it's called Marriage Problems. You can look it up on YouTube. He talks about impossible marriages. That's kind of where I got my title. Never does he ever speak of moving on to the tribunal or divorce or something if it goes bad. Never. So you've got all this, and then you get this annulment pamphlet that's sitting in the vestibules of all the churches that says, well, you got to get your divorce because then we won't look at your case. But once you do, we know that means that there's no hope for reconciliation. And I'm like, that's not it. Like, again, one of these things is not like the other. Who are we going to believe? And I have stories in my Impossible Marriages Redeemed book. One lady, he divorced her two times, and they ended up their lives blissfully happy. All their kids remained Catholic. He came back after those two divorces. She refused to get an annulment. And he died recently. They were elderly by the end of their lives, but he had divorced her twice and come back. I know this happening many times. So I don't know who we're following or who we're listening to, but we've inverted everything, and we need to stop and think, because souls are at stake. Nobody believes that souls are at stake, but this is actually eternal life or death here. So
Yeah, I've just done another book.
Just my 2 cents, Christine.
That's your 2 cents. That's like $1.88.
That's a little. That's
that was
more.
a lot. No, but I just did another book on purgatory. It's a little bit off the subject. And Princess Eugenie van der Waal was visited by souls in purgatory, and they would come to her in the most hideous forms and from the deepest levels of purgatory. And what were their offenses? Even the smallest of offenses would make them so disfigured and deformed. And so these things that we look at, we think that they're not big deal. She's like, every single word, every action, anytime you told someone, go get an annulment, is going to be something you have to make amends for. And so I think of how many, like our priests are not immune to this cultural inversion, as you're talking about, because they were raised in the same culture you and I were raised in. And so part of what you and I do is try to educate them. And so one of the things that frustrates me is I think about a dear, dear friend of mine, and, she has, and her husband said he felt like I was an angel on one shoulder and she had this other person who's like a devil on the other shoulder, having her fight and not fight for marriage. And at one point she fought for her marriage, and the stuff I was telling her about the church was what one, and now the stuff the other person's telling her is one. And she divorced her husband, and now she's like, well, my priest, I've talked to 3 or 4 priests and they all said I could probably get an annulment. And I said, based on what? And it get, and you know, it's angry. Well, he was abusive. It says, but none of that has to do with, tell me what happened before your wedding day. And you know, so before the wedding day, apparently, you know, they did all kinds of pre-Cana classes and engagement encounters, and the same wife even told her husband, it's like, no, we are going to be different than others. We know what we're doing. We're going to fight, and we're never going to give up on our marriage. And so when her priests, and this is just one of many thousands of examples I get, when her priest is like, well, just keep telling me more. Tell me more. I'm sure we'll find something and you can apply for that annulment. It just makes my blood boil, because I'm like, why do you have to search for it? If it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. And you tell her to fight for her marriage.
Which could be the thing that saves her soul. Carrying your cross with grace will transform you into a saint, could save your wretched spouse if they're that bad, and your children who will still have their, you know, their parents. And yet we are not told that. We're told, throw off your cross, give it to your children, put it on their shoulders, and go be happy. And nobody ever really is actually happier. They might feel relieved for a while. It's like getting an abortion. You know, they might feel relieved for a while. It doesn't really resolve the problem, because you've left disaster in your wake. And had you just been, you know, if fidelity had been, and keeping promises had been your route, and your children would see that. They actually see things like keeping promises and being faithful, even if you have to separate for danger. Okay, most divorces are not for high conflict and danger. We keep wanting to say that everything is about that.
Everyone's abusive. Every single person that comes to me says my spouse was emotionally abusive, which, by the way, Leila, you're probably aware, that's a new term. You abuse my emotions? How? And I taught classes on this, so don't get in. I mean, I realize that there are some manipulators that are like, you know, I'm going to hold these keys and you can't drive anywhere, and they don't have to lay a hand on you. But it's like, if you try to leave this house, I know where your kids live. So, I mean, that's the craziest stuff. But this idea of emotional abuse, he called me a bitch. I'm like, what'd you call him?
You call him?
Was that only in the middle of a fight? Because my husband and I both said things to each other that I've heard other people say are emotionally abusive. And he and I just had our 42nd wedding anniversary.
Right. Well, we had our 35th, and I can't tell you the things I said in my 20s, and I'm really ashamed that I did. And I did a lot of things that instigated a lot of things. I mean, we understand women.
I'm the one that had the affair 4 years after we got married. I'm in your book, Impossible Marriages Redeemed. I even told people, and God, you know, thank you, God, for forgiving me. I even said, I bet on my kids' lives I'll never get back with that man. And I'm like, thank you, God, for not taking my children's lives. But we did reconcile. And I told people he was emotionally abusive too.
Yeah.
Or the same argument. You must get the same one. You know, oh, has he ever hit you? Well, there was this one time, and then he grabbed my wrist and he pushed me down and I fell and I hit my head. And it's like, okay, well, does he always grab your wrist? Did he grab him randomly? Were you trying to hit him? You know, and they don't want to have to do that. And every single time the woman comes after him, it's like, and she's doing this, and he just grabs her wrist and he kind of tries to get her off. I've heard that exact scenario 5, 10, 15 different times. Anyway, it's just, we will twist it to make ourselves look exonerated from any fault in these situations. And one more thing I'm going to say, and most of the time there is one person that's really impossible. Most of the time it's not both. There's one that's begging the other to work and the other one's not. So I get that, but you are both at a certain level of fault in how you have interacted with each other. And that's what we have to face.
There's some saints that we are embarrassed by now, and they are the you know, the Saint Ritas, the Saint Monicas. There are a few of these blesseds that we don't even talk about. They're wonderful blesseds. They dealt with difficult husbands, very difficult husbands. And you read about their stories and you realize that they met that abuse, emotional abuse, sometimes physical abuse. And again, I'm not saying the church says to stay. Church says you can leave, but you're still married. But they met that with long-suffering kindness, with prayer, with becoming holy. And oftentimes these stories end with the husband converting, becoming a different person. The children are, faithful. The wife becomes a blessed or a saint.
Yeah.
Because
Catherine Ann Emmerich or Anne Catherine, I always get it mixed up. Anne Catherine Emmerich or Catherine Ann.
maybe, I don't know that. I don't know her.
I read her book, and her husband was there after she died, and he's like, I don't know how she tolerated me, but everyone knew in the town he was just such a
Yeah,
angry man, and
yeah.
even sexually, she would submit herself to him anytime he wanted it as an act of sacrifice, and she would try not to have any pleasure, and so not to hurt him, but she even wanted to stop herself from climaxing so that she could suffer more and have less joy. And I'm like, dang. I mean, that is, and I believe I'm talking about Anne Catherine Emmerich because that's the book I read on it.
Well, and everybody listening to any of this, especially young women, their heads are exploding right now because they're like,
Right.
how dare? And these women, they didn't know any better. They were stupid. It's like, okay, are they the stupid ones who saved their whole family and became saints? And, or are we the stupid ones who think that we're so much better than everyone who came before us? Um,
And when
and,
did sacrifice become a bad thing?
hmm. Well, yes. And yeah, don't get me started on feminism. And again, I want to say I am not saying that there are not horrible men who are evil and do evil things to their wives. I understand that. But there are also, and I have a couple examples of this in my book, we women, we can be horrible,
Nasty.
nasty. There's, men and women are different. Men are physically stronger than women. This is just nature. God made us this way. Vive la différence. I love that men are stronger than women. I have no problem with that. And I'm a very strong woman,
Yeah.
not physically, but believe me. But
That's why I love you.
men can, thank you, you too. I love you too. Men can very easily kill the physical body of a woman. No question about it. Women, our genius and our fault, because we take our genius to a sinful level, is that we can emotionally and psychologically kill our husbands, and we do it a lot. Women can destroy men, and we know it. I mean, we sit here, we're just like, oh, it's always men who are just terrible, terrible. It's like, women, we know how badly we can injure and spiritually, psychologically, and emotionally kill our husbands, because we can run circles around them that way. We know psychology better, we know emotions better, and we can do that to our men who don't have that brain capacity. They don't do emotional cues and things like that like we do. So God gave us equal opportunity to sin, to mortally sin, to destroy our marriages, to destroy our spouses in different ways, but we can destroy each other. And so this idea that there's one sex that's more pure and moral and good and righteous, and then there's one that's just, hopeless,
Bad.
evil, and beastly, is a lie. Again, it's just a lie from the devil. So, and everybody's going to come in with, well, you don't know because my situation, I'm not litigating anyone's particular situation. What I'm saying is that when you go by what the church says, what Christ's church says, the letter and the spirit of the law, but the letter of the law includes the spirit, you will become a saint and everyone around you will benefit. And that might entail sacrifice, and it looks different for everyone. It's going to look different for everyone. But fidelity, I will tell you, you deal with tons of standers. People who are they're standing for their vow after being abandoned or after having to leave because of abuse or whatever. Those standers who remain married, they have their ring on, they don't consider themselves unmarried. They're working hopefully towards reconciliation. You deal with them, I deal with them, because we get a lot of phone calls, we get emails, we get all sorts of things. The most wonderful thing I hear, so I spend hours on the phone sometimes with these, women and men who are distraught, they're upset, they don't know what to do, they're confused because everyone is telling them to move on, move on, move on, go get your annulment, go get remarried, take him to the cleaners, take her to the cleaners, whatever.
Yeah. You deserve this.
They deserve, they're horrible, horrible. And yes, okay, so I sympathize, yes, and I sympathize. Yes, this is terrible. Look what he's done to you. Look what she's done to you. This is horrible. But as you go along and you explain what the church teaches and that, marriage is for life and this is what the graces that you'll get. I have more and more gotten to the point an hour or two into these conversations where they will say, I have never, ever felt closer to Christ than I have on this cross.
Yeah.
And in remaining faithful and trying to, to love him anyway, or do this. And I'm like, exactly. That's literally how it works. And every single saint is transformed through the cross. Now we like to say, well, it's great that these saints were transformed because this, John of the Cross was in his monastery and he got beaten by the brothers, or he did this, or this one lost her parents when she was 9 and or St. Joseph Bakita, she was kidnapped and never saw her family again. And she was beaten and sold and taken to foreign lands. And she was, branded and all these different things. And then she found Christ. And so we kind of look at that and we go, wow, what a beautiful story. Like that's amazing. Look at these saints. But if it has anything to do with the state of life, which we call marriage, there is to be no suffering, none, no suffering. You should feel loved. If you don't feel loved and appreciated every minute of every day, if you're doing all the work and he's just doing the work by bringing home money and coming home and he's tired, he's beastly. He's beastly. And it's like, I've thought, why is it marriage is different? Marriage is a vowed state of life. It comes with the cross.
Because we're all in it. Because we're all in it.
Yeah. Well, I guess
we all want to be able to just, because I know firsthand. I know firsthand how hard it is.
Yeah.
Well, you need to pull yourself outside of it.
Yes. And God knew that most people would be married. Literally, that's how he designed
95% of people.
Yeah. That's the ordinary state of life in which we work out our salvation, is the married state. And I don't ever remember talk in scripture or anywhere else that this means that if you suffer, you've got to get out of it. I don't think that's anywhere in the history of any Christian.
I think you just hit the nail on the head when you said where we work out salvation. When is the last time, even in your good priests, right, good parishes, that you've heard them saying, your salvation is not guaranteed. You need to work it out with fear and trembling. And the idea we live only for the day. We live only for this life. No more do they have the skull on the altar as they did for thousands of years. It's a memento mori. Remember your death. The church went out of its way to say, I'm putting this skull here to remind you today doesn't matter. It matters, your decisions. But this is not about this lifetime. It's about eternity. And unless we focus on eternity, then, we're not going to understand this. And that's the whole problem with modernity, is we're focusing not on eternity, but on the immediate, only on today. Don't look at that. Don't look at what's behind the curtain. This is all that matters, Satan says to us. But this isn't what matters. We do need to look over there, because as soon as you say to someone, okay, and I say, okay, here's an analogy. I know that your spouse was miserable, and I know that he or she's still having affairs right now, and he's even entered into a fake marriage with the other woman or the other man or whatever. And I said, and your priest has given you permission to annul. Let's just go with that. I said, but which one would be more likely to get your husband to heaven? If you get a legal annulment, move on, maybe not find another spouse, or if you stay in the state that you're in, and no matter what he does, you say, my door is open, you can always come home. Which one of those scenarios would be more inclined to bring your husband back to God? Not to you, back to God. And they always answer, well, I suppose if I wait. What about your children? What about your grandchildren? Which of those scenarios would be more inclined to win their souls? Then they have to make a choice.
Beautiful. That is so well said. And I've seen it. You've seen it. I mean, time and again. I see that the people who stand for their marriage and they're mocked and they're ridiculed and they're lonely, and thankfully we're starting to see communities come together where they can find some support. They're trailblazers. What once was normal is now a trailblazer.
Yeah.
Um, you see that their kids are better off. If two of them go off and find new honeys and new romances, and oh, where are the
And
kids?
4 Christmases, as we think about
Oh,
the
yeah.
movie,
Yes.
right?
So such a blessing, right? To have all these Christmases. That these children are going to see two different responses to suffering. One is to remain faithful, one is to remain Christ-like, one is to be long-suffering and play the long game, because God said, "Be patience obtains all things," is actually what Saint Teresa of Avila said. We don't want to be patient, we don't want to suffer, but the children see fidelity. Wait, I my mom or dad still loves the unlovable. Who does that sound like? That sounds like Christ. That sounds like God. They love, just because someone becomes unlovable, they don't just discard them. And there are children of standers, because if people go both, they go, the children, once the annulment happens and everybody goes and remarries in the church, sometimes not in the church, sometimes, but either way, it's like, oh, another big white church wedding. Wait, the church just said my first family was not real? Even though, oh, I don't want to get into, they're still not illegitimate. Psychologically, when the church
You're
said
illegitimate. In your
parents
mind,
are
you're
not
illegitimate.
married, yeah. And now we're going to be part of that destruction of your family by giving you a second wedding, even though you were married, they were married for 20 years. The children, it does a number on their psyche. No one thinks of the kids at all. And they see, they leave the church. They leave the church like, this is BS. And they know it's BS. Everybody can sense BS. But the kids who have at least one parent standing, I have seen that the children, I've seen priests come out of those situations. I know one who is a priest here. I know another who's got a child in seminary. I see the children are still faithful Catholics. They don't have to become priests, but they're faithful Catholics. They've produced faithful families. The one in my book that I told you about, the 2 divorces, decades apart, like probably 20 years, where he was back and forth and divorcing her and having other women and getting married civilly. And then in the end, she said, all of our children, because she stayed faithful. And Father John Hardin, who was servant of God, he's going to be canonized, was her spiritual director. So she got the best advice, which was, don't go get your annulment. He said JP2, Father Hardin said, had a stack of annulments from America on his desk. And when Father Hardin was there and said, enough, and he pushed them off his desk. He was very critical of America and the annulment situations in America. So was Benedict. But all her kids, this lady who finally reconciled with her husband, who was contrite and humble at the end, he took his lumps. All her children, I think they ended up having 6 or 7 children, were faithful Catholics. They're still faithful Catholics. They saw her example. She was a saint, and she brought her husband home in the end. Took some time, patience, people. And also, they all married faithful Catholics. And so what is this woman's legacy of standing is the most beautiful legacy that will last for generations and generations. You think she felt good during this time where she's being dumped and he's remarrying other people and he's leaving for years?
Yeah,
and
insulted, having to go with half an
good.
income.
Exactly. Nobody feels good on the cross. Christ didn't feel great on the cross. I can assure you of that. But there was something salvific and redemptive that comes after we submit ourselves to the cross. And we just don't want to talk about it. Moderns do not want to talk about that.
Especially Americans, we have so many comforts, and I don't want to get rid of my comforts.
And yet we're committing suicide at the greatest rate. I mean, the suicide rates are through the roof.
Yeah, so how's it working for us?
Yeah, antidepressants. Everybody's on medication. Everybody's addicted to something. Everybody's lonely and miserable. People aren't getting married. They're not having children. And it's working. Like, I don't understand what people think that we're going to achieve by throwing off the Catholic way that has always been the way of suffering, the way to redemption, the way of the cross, following Christ to Calvary, which means death, people. It means suffering and death. But we think we just give it lip service. We say, yeah, we want to follow Christ. And yeah, follow Christ. Yeah, pick up your cross.
And when hand me my latte.
Yeah.
But make sure you still give me my pumpkin spice latte.
Well, exactly. because what happens when we actually get handed that cross? Oh, I don't want that cross. Like, oh, no, 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 no. See, I'm allowed to be happy in my relationship, and that's what God wants.
You know
Oh,
what I've said to people, Leila? I said, okay, let's pretend. Your husband comes back, your wife comes back, you have the marriage of your dreams, and you never have another fight again, and you no longer have to pick up that cross. I said, which one are you going to pick up? Because no one goes through this life without one. So do you want your child to be disabled, or would you rather have a dead child? How about losing a leg in a car accident, or being a quadriplegic? Or what about bankruptcy? How about if your spouse or a child has bipolar or schizophrenia? What about, and I'm listing all these other crosses. Which one do you want instead? Because you're going to have one of them. Which one do you want? And they're like God hardwired you so that you could handle the cross that you have, because you're never going to be without a cross in this lifetime.
right,
So you can have this one, you can have another one. Which one do you want?
right.
And that has stopped people cold. They're like, we all have
Yes,
our crosses.
it gets them thinking. There is no escape. In the beginning of Impossible Marriages Redeemed, I have a paragraph from Thomas à Kempis that basically says you can escape you can run away. You can run from the crosses that you're given. It will always follow you. You will always have that cross. You will have a cross. You can't escape it. And that's what people don't understand. They think that this world is about getting through it with as little pain as possible. We don't mind the pain we choose for ourselves. Like, I'll train for this marathon, or I can handle this particular chronic illness for myself, or I could do. But if it's something that comes in that we
Didn't
wouldn't
ask
we
for.
wouldn't ask for, and that's I find that's a line people won't cross. Like, I'll do everything for you, God. I'll give you my will. I'll give you my life. Oh, but I'm not crossing that line. Nope, that line. Nope, sorry. What? What? So you're right. Like, they will get a cross. They will get a cross. It's best to get the one that God hands to you in your state of life, because we will all ultimately, people don't, we never get taught this either. Everybody has a state of life, and most people are supposed to have a vowed state of life, which is either marriage or the consecrated life or holy orders. We take a vow, and that's the vow for our state of life. And our state of life, our duties and obligations of our state of life, is how we will be judged at our particular judgment. That is what it will be. It won't be, oh gosh, you did so great over here, with your pro-life work over here, but you never were talked to your children. You weren't, nice to your husband. You weren't, all this stuff. He's not concerned with what you could do out there if you're neglecting the duties of your state in life. So we need to take our duties of our state in life very seriously. And for most of us, that's going to be our vow in front of God and witnesses for the sacrament of matrimony. And that is what we will present to God. So I would be really, really careful if we try to throw off the vow, the state of life that God has placed us in, because again, it's something that is new to this era that we think we don't have to commit to or be faithful to what we say. We either keep our sacred promises or we don't. And I say, whoa to those who decide they're not going to do that. And I'm guilty. I'm guilty because before I got this through grace, thank you, Jesus, I encouraged people who were suffering. Well, yeah, your marriage probably is invalid anyway, and sure enough, gosh, go figure, they got their annulments. I would do it. So I've confessed all of it. This is the thing. If you've been part of this, any of you, and you realize I should not have done that, especially if you witnessed to the wedding. A lot of people, you go to a Catholic wedding, you're in that pew, or you're standing up as an official witness, a bridesmaid or a groomsman. You have an obligation. You may not understand this. You are witnessing something. So for you to later bear false witness, which of course is a sin against a commandment, to say, oh yeah, no, you know what? I'm going to sign an affidavit. I'm going to tell why I don't think that they should have been married. Yeah, I'm going to do that for the tribunal. your job is to stand for that marriage that you witnessed. You don't need to take sides. Surely you could take sides in like, okay, you need to be safe. I'll help you get safe, whatever. But if there's no safety issues, you don't even need to take sides. You just say, you guys need to work this out. I will help you in any way that I can. Don't listen to the voices that would drive a wedge between you, because that's a demon. That's a demonic voice. Even if the person saying it doesn't know they're cooperating with the devil. But basically your job as a witness to that marriage isn't to then later become a witness to the tribunal to undo it, to try to undo it. It is to say, I was there. I saw this. I saw this wedding happen. I was a witness to it officially.
Yes. And it was
Part of
valid
my
based on
job
everything
is
I
I
saw.
saw. I was a eyewitness. And don't tell me that you're going to do what you said earlier, which is what the tribunals do. I have a woman now who is fighting for her marriage in a tribunal. God bless her. This tribunal is big, and it's got 100% affirmative rate, and I don't think they know what to do with her. But she's kept that fighting for many, many years, believe it or not. And she has people witnessing from their wedding saying it's not a wedding, it wasn't a marriage. And it's like, no, you guys were there. We met in youth group. We were mature, we were in career. Nobody was like just a 12-year-old kid or a 14-year-old kid. You were there. And
We went
this
to Pre-Cana. Your mom and dad said we made a good decision.
Everybody signed the affidavits, and then Pre-Cana. Oh my goodness! The more Pre-Cana we have, it seems the more annulments we have. It's like, well, what's happening? Are you not vouching for your sacraments? You've prepped these people for months on end, a year now. They're trying to make it, and you're telling me that at the end of all that, you're just going to give them the annulment anyway? Because I've seen it happen. I have seen it happen many times. But what happened with this woman too was that the grounds, like you said, we're gonna. It's like fishing. Well. Yeah, we have all this evidence that you guys loved each other and everything was good for 20 years before, you had an affair or whatever. But you probably couldn't give consent because of this. Oh, no, that didn't work because that was here's another ground. This ground, it's more of this nuance over here. It's like, why are the church tribunals
You
trying?
had just seen the movie Carrie the night before, so you could have been psychologically ready that day, because you said you cried and it scared you. So, there it is.
Cried.
There it is. Yeah.
We can find this, and you get these psychological things, which Cardinal Burke, who was the head of the Signatura, who was very knowledgeable on these things, canon lawyer, said the thing that should be the hardest to prove in the tribunal is the thing we use. I think it's 98% of the time now. It's all
America.
the issues. Yes, in America, we have a problem. And why are we using the thing that should be the hardest to prove because it's the most nebulous and subjective? We're trying, and the answer is we're trying
to put a square peg in a round hole. Let's just rub off the edges as best as we can, make it fit.
Make it fit because we're trying to give you your annulment. And that's the way it goes. And I talked to one guy in a tribunal, a staffer. He said, and he was disgusted with a lot of the stuff that goes on in there. And, there's a few whistleblowers here and there. And he said, we are unfortunately a customer model. I mean, we want to give the people what they want because we want to, do you really want me to go off on the, okay.
I have fun. I'm just going to sit here and say, just go.
Yeah. Well, when we say, when we have dioceses writing articles online and having workshops and doing magazine articles in their magazines saying our goal in the tribunal isn't because what is the goal? The goal should be a truth finding. This is
check to see if a marriage was valid or not.
This is a court. This is actually a court of law.
Give me some evidence.
Evidence, hard evidence. We need to evaluate it. Where's the defender of the bond? I can never figure out where these defenders are because in some dioceses they don't defend a single bond. So they're just figureheads, I guess. And we pay, I guess the diocese is paying for all this because now it's all free for everyone to
I want to be a defender of the bond in a tribunal. I would so love to be one.
So what they say is their goal isn't to find truth. Their goal is, and I kid you not, healing. Okay, I didn't know this was therapy. Fine if there's some healing in the process. That's not the goal, is to heal anybody.
They don't see a judge when you have a kid in there for murder or shoplifting. I want to focus on healing and not on whether or not they really shoplifted.
Yeah, we're going to find out the facts, right? And then healing, and then this one kills me. Returning people to the sacraments. Now, that's a goal. Returning people people to the sacraments. My question is, why aren't they able to go to the sacraments? Well, the abandoned spouse is able to go, assuming no other mortal sin on their head, because they didn't commit the sin of abandonment or divorce. They are a victim, and the Catechism says this, and this is just common sense, like the children, they are a victim of divorce. There's no need, unless they have another mortal sin that we're not disclosing, and we don't, but that would be unrelated to what
they're not gaining anything.
Yeah, they can go. So they're
To the
not, so
sacraments.
the abandoned spouse can go
Anyway.
So who are they trying to return to the sacraments? The abandoner who has already found and married or is having an affair with another person. So the adulterer. Okay, well, guess what? Even if you're remarried, even though you're not because it's civil, and you have more children with this person, you're still married to that first person, and that first family is actually your family that you have responsibility for, your obligation for. So this is like an adulterous family, and these kids, unfortunately, you brought them into this adulterous situation, and you still have to provide for them, and you still have to provide for this woman that you.
But we live in a broken world. There's going to be consequences, right?
And some things we can't fix. The church cannot fix everything for you when you have messed up. So this idea that we're just returning people to the sacraments by screwing over the first family, by doing violence to the sacrament of matrimony and the tribunal process, but also you can go back to the sacraments tomorrow. Nobody's saying you cannot go to the sacrament unless you get your annulment. What we're saying is stop sinning.
Yeah, the abandoning spouse can say, I'm sorry before God.
Go to confession, right? Go to confession, make it right, go back to your previous spouse, or if you can't, because let's say she's left too, and live a life of penance. Live a life of penance, but you're still married to that person. Stop sleeping with that person. Provide for your children on both sides. You know, you can go back to the sacraments without a tribunal. So this idea that like the tribunal is there to return people to sacrament because there's no other way, which is the implication, like, well, you got to go through it because there's no other way you can get back to the sacraments. Untrue. Just stop sinning, stop mortally sinning, and you can go receive the sacraments. So all of this is never explained to any of these people because it's a system. And I've learned that you cannot change an entrenched system, unfortunately, but you can enlighten, which is what we're trying to do, individuals so that they don't get involved in the system if you think it's a little bit corrupt, or some things have gone wrong, which again, the two popes, Benedict and JP2, have already said that. So I'm not speaking out of turn when I say there's something fishy in the American tribunals. There are some good tribunals in America. I'm not whitewashing. I'm not trying to, not whitewash. I'm not trying to, paint them all.
You're not trying to demonize them all bad. Right.
And the people and I will say this, the people in the tribunals are mostly people of goodwill. They do not know that there's a different approach and that the system is not what it should be. They think they're doing what they're
different than it is in other countries.
Exactly. Like other countries, it's unheard of to do these kind of annulments. And they are operating out of goodwill because that's how they've been trained. Yeah. Now, some of them do probably have some thoughts now and then like, oh, was that really? But, and I've interviewed enough, anonymous people that I know that some of them are like, yeah, we have a problem. We have a problem. The other problem is sometimes you get people in the tribunals who are the priests, because there's always priests, in the tribunal. Some of them go to the tribunal, not all. I'm not smearing everyone on this. I'm saying if you watch carefully, you'll see with your own eyes, there are priests who could not be in parish settings. So you have to put them somewhere. What do? Oh, well, go get your canonlogry or go be. Well, a lot of them, sorry to say, might have homosexual tendencies, that type of thing. They don't really believe in heterosexual marriage anyway. A lot of
there's people. One in New England where the man left the priesthood. And actually one of my standards is in that diocese, which actually I was shocked because her husband was applying for the annulment and they declined it. They said, no, your marriage is valid, which I was stunned. But anyway, she is actually
unusual because we can't believe it when it happens. Like it's such an unholy.
It's so stunning. Yeah, but there was a priest who left the priesthood because he was gay, and he even has a gay lover that they know of, and he's still on the tribunal. I know what you're talking about. Yep. Yeah, and you're like, how is
tribunal? Yeah. He's sitting on the tribunal. You've got people who who believe, and these might not be the same types of priests, but my one there's a tribunal judge of 20 plus years that I talked to, and she said, Leila, you need to entitle your next book, Does the Catholic Church Believe in Marriage Anymore? Because she believes that a lot of these priests, and they're good. She's, I have no beef with them personally, but it's as if the way they keep voting on these and the way their judgments go, because she sometimes judges against. So she wants she thinks the marriage is valid, but she's outvoted. There's a panel. But she said that some of these priests seem to believe that laity are incapable of making a permanent vow the way that priests are. So there's almost like this clericalism of, well, we can do it because we're priests, but the laity, not so much. It's hard for them. It's hard for them.
How
And
arrogant,
it's like,
right?
what? This is a natural, first of all, marriage is a low bar. It's a natural right. And it's a natural, it's not the, it's not being a priest, but it is more accessible. You're more able to fulfill these duties. So all of that is problematic, and it's a mindset that goes on with some people in many tribunals. And so if we bring awareness, I've had two people recently who I've talked to, and they were like, everybody's telling me to get my annulment because he's gone, or he did this, or she left. And recently I've had two people, and you might have had this too, that have said, you know what, I'm withdrawing my petition for an annulment. I'm withdrawing it.
I have.
Like, thank you, Jesus, because you're going to probably get it anyway. I mean, it's not like people say, well, I need to know the truth. It's like in an American tribunal where almost everyone can get it. And if you don't get it, you go to the next tribunal and try again. You appeal it, and then you can appeal it in a different diocese if you want later, and you can appeal it to Rome. And most people will end up getting an annulment if they want them. Like a vast majority of Americans. And so when they say, well, I want to go to the tribunal to know the truth, are you sure that first of all, it's not an infallible judge. It's not an infallible judgment. That is just a fact. We know this. Church teaches that. It's a moral certitude. And why don't you just keep your vow? Like, I know it's crazy, but just why? What if we investigated every priest and said to every priest, you need to go through months or a year or more of investigation of whether or not your mind was exactly in the right spot when you took your ordination vows, and let's nullify or most of the vows of, and we're not talking about laicization because that implies that they're still validly ordained, but let's nullify 90%, 98, of the priests who come to us. What would that do to our churches? Total chaos.
Yeah.
They weren't ever a real priest. This never really happened. The
So
Eucharist,
the sacraments they conferred can't
all the sacraments, all the absolution,
none of your
all the
confessions.
confirmation, all the confession, everything is fake. Everything didn't happen. And you can imagine the psychology of the laity and the priesthood. Well, that's what we have with married people right now. Our psychology is back of our minds. We all are thinking, I mean, they could probably annul our marriage. And I interviewed the psychologist from one of the tribunals who said, yeah, I had to leave because I figured very easily after a year or so, I could make any marriage null. I could bring back a report. And I was also told, and again, these are some good dioceses. I'm not talking about the crazy ones. She said, I could bring a report. And I was trained also to kind of find, there were certain judges I knew wanted you to dig this way or go this way. And it's like, what are we doing? What have we done? And why is this normal? But again, we're swimming in it, so we don't see it. We don't notice it. It doesn't resonate with us that something terribly wrong has happened. There's a woman in the Cleveland Archdiocese. She's still there. Last time I checked, she's in the tribunal. Her name is Lynette Tate. I think Bay McFarland has a video of her, an audio, where she's talking to a man during a workshop, an annulment workshop. And he says something like, well, I'm a little worried about not getting my annulment or whatever. And she said, what's your profession? Or he volunteers that he's an engineer or something like that. She said, oh, and she giggles. She's like, oh, engineers, attorneys, accountants, don't worry. You guys, you don't have the emotional bandwidth, basically, to confect a valid marriage. So in other words, this woman believes that any accountant, any lawyer, and any engineer isn't capable of confecting a valid marriage, and they will annul it. She will annul that. And it's on, you can look it up. It's YouTube. It's Lynette Tate, the Cleveland Diocese, through Mary's Advocates. And she's still working there. And this was years ago. This was recorded like 10 years ago. And I'm thinking, what Is this normal?
I think
Why
of
are we
one,
out there?
yeah. I just watched today, and I don't know, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't say the name, but everybody in the standing world, Christine Niles just interviewed someone, and maybe I'll say the name, but she works for the diocese, and she's on her fourth marriage. The first three were annulled, and they were actually talking. Christine Niles, who I respect greatly, was talking about, see, this is why the church gives it. These are perfectly valid. It's like, well, if you were too immature the first time, you should have figured it out by the second time. But then you're saying the third time you had to figure out why the second time it wasn't valid, and then the third time
Well, I guess,
you basically don't have the capability of ever confecting the vow. But then the church says, you know what? You understand this annulment thing. Let's
now
go
you
ahead and
do.
hire you. We're
Yeah,
going to
now
hire you
you.
to teach others.
Oh my gosh, the fourth time's a charm, I guess.
Well,
But
maybe not. Although
maybe.
I did talk to someone who recently was trying to defend her. And she
Oh,
said, well,
and I
her
know who you're
fourth
talking
husband just died. And I said, well, she's basically imploring my pity. Well, you need to be compassionate. He died. I said, I'm sorry that she's going through that pain. I'm sorry that you've had a life with someone. I said, but that person is not qualified to teach someone how to fight for a marriage
about.
because she's cut and run from three.
If the person, I don't want to speculate, but I know that the biggest divorce and separation ministry in America is founded and run and by a woman on her fourth marriage with three annulments. Her husband had
Is
one
it the
annulment.
same one or is it a different person?
Probably. I don't know who you're. I didn't get the
Okay,
name.
yeah.
I probably. And my thought is, I also know that she's a life coach who has counseled many people,
Yes.
because people come to me and they say, "What do you think about this?" And this doesn't sit right with me. She told my husband to get a divorce, and we're trying to work out our marriage. And well, when people are doing life coaching through their wounds, through their own wounds that they clearly never, because four husbands is a lot of wounds, and three annulments,
Yeah.
and one on his side, and life coaching is something. When you're talking about marriage stability and not getting divorced, you have to. There has to be some truth in advertising. So when the divorce ministries and the separation ministries are all put together and overseen as a business by someone who has a vested interest in multiple annulments and multiple divorces, I would stay away from all that. Like I would go with what the saint said, and I would go with what came before. I would not go with someone who has a real a real investment in getting annulments and getting divorced. But that's common sense. But yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I could talk to you forever, and we really just have been talking about one chapter in
Mhm.
an upcoming book, The Reflexive Annulment Seeking, which is one chapter in Unholy Inversions. Can I
Right.
get you to commit online that when the book is done, we can get you to talk about the other chapters
Of
of
course. Yes,
Unholy? Yeah,
yes.
what other things are
Who knows when it'll be
inverted?
done? But yeah, I'm working on it. So
It's
yeah,
going to be done, girl. You're going to get it done. So let me ask you a question about the book before we close it up.
yeah.
Knowing you, and I haven't asked you this question yet, knowing you don't just say these things are unholy. You do actually probably put forth, here's what we can do about it. Here's how we can help change this. Um, what would you say we could do in terms, and that's actually how I end on my shows anyway, is name one thing you'd have our listeners do differently as a result of something they heard today.
Oh
What
my
can they do
goodness.
about this?
Well, this is always tricky because I'm a modern influencer. I hate that word. I hate everything about it. That's why I haven't done your podcast in a long time, because I try not to. I don't like to do podcasts. I just want to write. I'm a writer. I've always been a writer.
I have been begging Mrs. Leila Miller for over a year to come back.
You're so sweet. And yes. So if you ever see me on podcasts, it's usually reluctantly, but that doesn't matter. You got to get the word out. And you are a modern influencer as well. But one thing I do always tell people is, if you have to forego modern influencers, including me, except not Christine, you need to listen to Christine.
No, I'm with
If
you.
if you need to forego modern podcasts, modern, life
Anyone
coaches,
who influence, right? Coaches,
motivational
podcasters.
speakers, and all these people who are out there appealing to your feelings and your, blah, blah, blah. Please go read the saints. Please go read the ancient writings. The thread is so consistent, and it's so beautiful that you will be awakened. And to me, all I want this book to do is, because I give examples, this is why it's different now, and it shouldn't be. I want people to start diving into the 20 centuries of treasures and the patrimony that we have, the spiritual classics, all the things we have that are spoken so simply that we can apply today to start becoming saints, because it's the one thing that the devil does not want us to do, is to see what it was like amongst the saints and throughout the thread of saints throughout history. Because the universal church doesn't mean just the universal church on earth today. It means the universal church stretching all the way back to the founding in Jesus, with Jesus Christ. And so that's the universal church that I want everybody to read and listen to, so that you can get some bearings and understand how badly modernism and modern thoughts have corrupted us in our approach to how we live the faith. That's my biggest prayer. And I think I'm going to end the book that way by just saying, once you close this book, just please go start reading the saints. Go read everyone from previous times, and it will be simple and easy to understand. They are amazing. Some of them were peasants. You don't need to have a degree, and you will be transformed in your interior life, and then you will start to transform your families and your communities. So that would be that's how I say fix things, but
That is so important. And that actually just brought me to something I think about since I read John Clarke's book, Betrayed Without a Kiss, is that when you go back into history, when you go back into the culture, to understand that even King Henry VIII understood that his marriage was valid until death, which is why he killed all of his previous spouses, right? Well, you're dead now, I can marry. That's why he was applying for annulment. Tell me this marriage wasn't valid. The whole culture, all of society knew that it was valid. So don't judge it by the standards of today. Go back to Jesus, go back to what is truth. And then, yeah, carry that cross. I really, really appreciate that. And I really, really appreciate you, Leila, because I do know how much you don't want to do podcasts. You're just a happy little typewriter, on your computer, getting your books done.
my hand now. I've got pen to legal pad, because I'm like, I don't even want to be on a screen anymore. I'm writing it with a nice pen that I like, and on my yellow legal pad. So yeah.
Who's transposing it into the computer?
So then this is what I do. I then I write, I talk into my phone. It's over here, so I don't have to look at the screen. I talk the whole thing into my phone, and then I just cut and paste that into a Word document, and then I edit. Whatever needs to be edited, I just edit it. And that way I'm not having to sit at this computer all day. And I love just the handwriting, because it's back to that
It
this
feels
cursive
good.
writing.
It feels good.
It does. It feels great, which is why I'm actually enjoying this process a lot more than I started out, because I started out just doing this. I'm like, I can't. And so it's good now.
Oh, well, I do look forward to the book coming out, but this chapter alone, for the audience that watches me, this is going to be very powerful. Don't just jump to the annulment thing. Protect the vow. Proverbs, one last thing. Proverbs said, and I was just going to try to look it up, but I couldn't do it without looking away from my screen. But there's a proverb that says, it is better not to vow than to vow and not repay. And you can look at that in terms of bankruptcy, financial loans. If you tell someone, I'm going to pay you back this loan, and you don't, because with that purgatory book, well, I've been reading tons of purgatory books. It's my place these days. You will have to make amends in eternity for what you didn't make amends for today. So if you vow that you're going to stay in your marriage and you don't, there are severe punishments for that, even after you repent. Protestants think it's done. It's repented, it's gone. No, you still have to make amends, and you may have a very lengthy time in purgatory, which, praise God, you're going to get to heaven. But to make amends, and let's just make amends here on earth, because it's so much easier. All the saints say it. There's no suffering on earth that is as great as a suffering in purgatory.
That's right. That's right.
Suffer here.
Do it here.
Carry it. You're awesome. Leila, people can find you on leilamiller.net, and they can find your blogs. Do you write blog articles anymore, or mostly just the books now?
Yes, I do. And I write a lot for Crisis magazine, but and then I usually reproduce them on the blog. But yeah, so Leila Miller.net, and go to my blog. Yep. And there's also marriage support, and there's prayers for struggling marriages, like that are beautiful prayers that you can pray either alone or with your spouse, or friends and family can pray for a troubled marriage. But we got to start praying for these marriages.
Absolutely, we do. And it might be yours and it might be your child's, but do what is good and holy. Carry the cross. If it's your child, if it's your sibling, if it's your parent, help them to carry that cross. Tell them you support them. Do not mock them. Do not tell them to move on. Do not tell them they're delusional. What do you think, your marriage is going to reconcile? Actually, let me tell you, there are thousands of marriages that have. Are you delusional for thinking they haven't? I get angry when people say that. So be the support system for people who are carrying this cross. And if they break down and cry 5 years from now because their spouse is gone, you hold them and hug them like you would if they said, my spouse died 5 years ago. Don't tell them it's time for the pain to have gone away. So anyway, I know you can follow me on all the places: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Sorry, I still call it Twitter, TikTok, my website, breakfastwithbacon.com. Leila, we already told them about leilamiller.net. And I do know when your book comes out, it's going to be on sophiainstitute.com. But are there other social media platforms that you are on?
I have a limited, I kind of go on and off, but on X, I'm Leila Miller LCB, I think, for Little Catholic Bubble. That used to be my old blog. And then I do have a Facebook, my personal Facebook page, and a professional one, but I really only use the personal one. So look for Leila Miller. I'm there. And then Instagram. It's
Well, how about you send me the ones that you want people to find you on, and I'll post it in the show notes.
sounds great. I will do that.
All right. I usually tell my guests how I end the show, and I forgot to tell Leila. She's been on the show before, but it's been a while.
I think I remember.
She might remember. Okay, so we'll try it. And if she doesn't remember, I will remind her. So thank you guys all for watching Breakfast with Bacon. I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon. And I want to remind you always to live your life.
Sunny side up.
I didn't even cue her.
Thank